Gentlemen, we are here and ready to roll. Ready to roll with these questions. Just had to, just long days, guys. Long days, gentlemen. Long days. And I doing the best I can. Now, as usual, we start with the wine tonight. And this is it's a poignant night for us, okay? It's a poignant night because we have the end of our journey into Spain. Now, I presume we're going to be doing stuff like this for a very, very long time. Um, I have to tackle the entire world before I move on to a different kind of theme. By that point, we'll probably do more precise side by sides. But this is the end of our situation with the wine for Spain. After this week, tomorrow we're having a periscope. We're having COVID cabal tomorrow, and tomorrow's periscope we are going to move into Portugal. So, which leads us into the wine itself right now. So, for the end of Spain, I chose the northwest. So we have the Galician coast here, but really, what we're talking about is we're talking about Rias Baixas, which is that little map I showed you, which is where we have Albarino. Albarino, a very, very a white wine that makes up over half of all the wine in Spain. A white wine in Spain, excuse me. So, as you've noticed with Spain, we don't have a ton of white wines. So it's a very red heavy country, um, especially from the standpoint of what gets exported, because of course there's white wines locally that people will drink all the time that just don't get exported. But we tried a white Rioja, which is kind of interesting, very oak heavy, although not huge compared to red Rioja. We had a Rueda, right? Remember Rueda? So let's just take a look at the map. We had Rioja, then we west. So we have Albarino. Albarino is a very deep colored, as you can see here, very deep colored, very fruity red grape, which is kind of new in a certain sense. And this is from the region here, Bierzo, if I pronounced that wrong. But Ribiera Sacra, Valderas, and Bierzo, or Biejo, whatever. These are all relatively recent areas of being rediscovered, so to speak. All right, so the little background here. So we're going to start with Rias Baixas. So Rias Baixas, this is Galicia, okay? So it's a sub-region of Spain, very distinct culture. In some ways kind of more like the Portuguese, but they would not like to hear you say that. They're their own distinct group in Spain. This is a very, very different area from the rest of Spain geographically. Not to say that Spain should be generalized geographically, but if you look at this map, up in this area, there's these mountains here, right? And these mountains block the Atlantic, which comes in. So you have high plateaus here, which are much drier. And of course, there's plenty of like wetter areas that come up. Remember in Upper Rioja, we had some of that stuff. But what we're really looking at with Spain on the coast, and especially this northwest section here, it's very, very wet. Okay, the Atlantic is here. This is a cold part of the Atlantic, and they just get tons and tons of rain. So one of the reasons that Albarino is able to do well here is because Albarino is a thick-skinned grape. Okay, Albarino is a thick-skinned grape, and that's important because because in wet areas and moist areas, you'll have things like mildew that come into the picture. Okay, and mildew, if it gets on a grape, can kill a grape. It can rot it, right? You're not going to have a crop. Thick-skinned grapes are more resistant to mildew than thin-skinned. A thin-skinned grape would be Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir would do terribly here. Even though Pinot Noir likes cool climate, doesn't do well with a lot of wetness. Okay, so these are some interesting things when it comes to selection of grapes. You have all of these grape races, so to speak, which have their own varietals, right? That have their own ability to do well in certain areas, and they vary like that. It's very interesting, and it's why I think it's great. One of the reasons I love Europe is that different parts of Europe, for the most part, they have their own local varietals that evolved in those locations. And it's cool to have Cabernet. Cabernet is a great grape. Sauvignon Blanc's a great grape. Merlot's a great grape. Pinot Noir's a great grape. Chardonnay. But it's a little bit, it's nice to see in Europe how you have so much interesting local expressions. Okay. Now, Albarino got wiped out by phylloxera. They started planting some really crappy, low-yielding or high-yield grapes that didn't produce a lot of flavor, like Palomino Fino, which remember we used as the base for sherry. It's okay with sherry because you're doing other things to sherry. But for a standard white wine, it's pretty crappy. It made a big resurgence only in the 90s. And it's got a kind of interesting area. It's granite. Granite's very, very good for producing grapes. Many people believe that it's only second to limestone in terms of soil quality for grapes. And it has these, it's very, very steep because it has these little fjords, right? So if you look at this map to get an idea of it, you see these are like fjords, right? It's the same kind of stuff that you would see up in Norway to a certain extent. These are the rias, by the way, the rias. And these are very, very steep, and they have trees that create these big canopies, which prevent things from overgrowing there. It's difficult to farm, but it's cool. So anyway, Albarino is very, very tart and very, very aromatic. Now, Mencia, this is a very interesting looking bottle. I don't know if I like it so much. It's like a Sex in the City kind of bottle. Only Mencia I could find in the store though. And also, like, it's not really good for the brand. Like, can you even really read that? I don't know. I would advise a different, like, not the silver here. It's probably not so good. Anyway, so Mencia. This is kind of interesting. So the story around this was an area that was really, really abandoned once phylloxera hit. And in many ways, I'm not even sure to what extent it was. It didn't have really much prestige even before that. Some guy, his last name is Palacios, he took a risk in it, and he started to try to grow the local grape Mencia there, and it was a big hit. It was a big hit. The soil here is granite and slate. He reintroduced all this stuff to the area, and it's now become like an exploding region, a really, really popular region. It's a lot like Rias Baixas, except less wet, right? Because it's further inland, it's further from the coast. So it's become popular as an alternative to sort of the standard Tempranillo reds or Grenache blends in Spain. So let's go and check these out. It's a good Albarino. The acidity is always so. See, this is like this facial expression. I'm not acting, guys. I'm not acting. It's really, really tart. And this is, you can always expect this from Albarino. Now, there's a lot of white wines that can be pretty tart. The one thing with Albarino that is a really big tell is that it's very round, right? And I know this is kind of like a silly way to describe it on one hand, but like try to it's like it's like the flavor feels very round, right? When something feels very tart and sharp, it's a very different feeling sensation in your mouth than when it sort of expands. And that's because of the aromatic nature of Albarino, at least in my perspective. That's how I would describe it. It's just it's a very bright grape. So, you could contrast this with a lot of Rieslings, for instance, which can also be very, very tart. But with a Riesling, you usually get more of like there's more of like a cleanness to them. Usually, there's more of a cleanness, whereas this is like it's almost like it's almost like a tropical fruit kind of flavor that you're getting from the whole thing. And how this is made, it's often made with stainless steel. Sometimes it's made with oak. So it varies. It varies. Traditionally, it's more stainless steel. Oak's being experimented with. Let's try the Mencia. I've had Mencia very rarely, only a couple times. So actually, this Mencia has a lot of some oak on it, which is interesting. And this is really, I mean, we are talking like it's almost like you're smelling charred meat, like charcoal or something. The fruit is such a dark kind of blackberry sort of fruit. Mm, I really like that a lot. I really like that. It's such a paradox, this Mencia, because on one hand, it's actually relatively light bodied. Like it's not like it's not the oak doesn't really overpower you. It's kind of a lighter oak, and it's just not like once it's in your mouth, it feels like kind of just juicy and refreshing. But the fruit is so intense on this like dark, like foresty kind of profile. I really recommend you guys. I mean, Albarino you should try anyway, just because Albarino is so standard for a Spanish white. But I really recommend you guys try to get a Mencia. It doesn't have to be from Bierzo, right? All right. So if you see any of these regions here, any of these regions, Bierzo, Valderas, Ribiera Sacra, Ribeiro, these are all gonna have Mencia growing, especially these last three. Very similar. I'm not even, to be honest, sure exactly what delineates them as being separate appellations, why that's even necessary. Um, but they all produce the same kinds of wines, and you know, well, what is I'm not sure what. Well, this is a your suggestion is termination. There's nothing to be gained from keeping evil alive. Well, I'm not sure that the context of that is, but yeah, guys, this Mencia is really good. It's really interesting. Really different kind of wine. It's very wild. Like it feels like you're getting something like out out in the out in the wild area. You know, you're like you're. It just feels like you're like if you were to meet some crazy wild guy in the woods and he were to offer you some wine, that's what it tastes like drinking this Mencia. Like there's nothing standard about this profile. So guys, that is our time with the wine in Spain. We are done with Spain for the foreseeable future. Tomorrow we will be doing a fun thing. I just want to let you guys know before we go into the dating and relationship portion of this. Just want to let you know that we will be doing a little section on we're going to be doing Vino Verde. And what I got for you guys tomorrow is I got two Vino Verdes. I got the cheapest one I could find, and I got the most expensive one, which is about a difference between $5 and like $16. Because I want to see, is there really a difference? Because Vino Verde is known to be this super low alcohol content, slightly fizzy, and really light, just very light, easy drinking wine from Portugal. And the reason I think it's cool to continue with it is that Albarino is literally across the river. The River Minho, which separates Galicia from Portugal, is where on the north side Albarino is made, and on the south side, um, you have Vino Verde. Now they also grow Albarino there too, but that's where Vino Verde region is. So very similar climate. So we're gonna try those Vino Verdes, and then after that, we're gonna be getting into. I'm gonna try to space out the fortified wines because Portugal is big on their fortified, but we're gonna do port. We got some port coming. So all right, let me get this set up here. Let's get these questions up. Oh wait, no. You gotta update. Just one moment. One moment, my friends. Vino Verde is it's a good question. Vino Verde is considered in every other country in the world to be just a white grape. In Portugal, it's considered to be green. They have it on wine lists. They have um, rojo, I guess, branco, which is white, and um, Yeah, I'm losing track of time. Thanks, Ben. It's actually, yeah. So tomorrow, Tuesday, we're gonna have it. We're gonna have the COVID cabal. But basically, all right, good. I got it all loaded up here now. But yeah, they have it as a separate category, because I think that the grapes are a little greener. I think they are greener than maybe other white grapes, because white grapes can, they kind of range in the spectrum from being greenish to whitish, even grayish, really like Pinot Gris. That's how you make orange wines, from the ones that are more on the gray pink, and then it moves into like light red, magenta-ish, which is like Pinot Noir, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right, cool, guys. Let's get into the periscope. So, first question: any quick tips on attracting tier one women besides the obvious one of standing out in some way? Um, so I don't. I mean, staying out in some way, sure. Yeah, I mean that's helpful in general with dating, but the big thing here I would emphasize is that a tier one woman is not. All right, here's how I'll put it: things that we do to improve the number of women we date, to improve our dating life, are usually about attracting more. Like, we're usually about attracting more quantity. And so, things that will attract more women in a quantity level to your life are not going to be against you getting a tier one woman, um, but they're not going to make as big of an impact as they would on lower and lower levels, right? This is important. It's important to understand this. A tier one girl is a girl that, in my perspective, okay, in my perspective, that there is some deeper significance to your connection. Um, I think that there is some sort of, I'm not saying using the term soulmate, but there's some sort of like life connection here, that you guys are drawn to each other in a very deep way, and you're going to get involved. You have to get involved with each other. Is basically what the point is. You have to get involved with each other. Whether or not that lasts is a different story, but you are destined in a certain sense to get involved with each other. Um, or at least you have the ability to make that kind of impact on each other's life. And so a tier one woman, it's really about being in as much alignment as you possibly can, and making sure you're putting yourself out there. If you are getting into alignment and you're putting yourself out there, then you are more likely to stumble upon a tier one woman. That's the main point here to make. Um, I would also make the point that if you're spending a lot of time slamming through lower tiers of women, you're not going to be resonating at a level to probably attract a tier one woman. But life can be complicated. Life can be mysterious. So I don't want to like say if you do this, it won't happen. But I've found that guys who get distracted and just getting laid tend to not be in the emotional state to have a tier one woman make an impact. Now, maybe they're doing that and they meet a tier one woman and she kind of challenges them and then snaps them out of it. So, the big thing here I want to emphasize is that you're not going to meet any women if you don't actually go out there and do things. And this is a real sense of, I was going to say frustration, but sometimes this happens with guys who I work with. It's like your life needs to involve interactions with women if you are going to meet women. That's just how it is. Your life needs to it has to happen. If you're not meeting women, I'm not saying you have to go hit the bars, or there are a lot of different ways to meet women, but you got to put yourself out there. You got to be involved in the world. Um, you can't be just in your head doing things that only you care about. You're not going to meet them that way. So let me see here. How to quickly identify girls for arranged marriage, not dating. I mean, I think any girl you're gonna meet for an arranged marriage purposes, um, you are going to, yeah, any girl for like an arranged marriage purpose, you're going to have to go through like family connections for that. I mean, you can't just like do it on your how do I put it? I guess I don't fully understand the question because like that's always going to come through family. That's always going to come through some social structure if you're going to be doing any kind of arranged marriage. So you won't identify them. You'll identify families that support that stuff. And your families will probably identify families that support that stuff. Or you'll go through one of the more modern versions of it, which is like, I think there's a lot of modern kind of matchmaking. Okay, next question. Do you believe in breaks in relationships? Um, the general answer is no. I think that breaks in relationships are usually just breakups, but people are not mature enough to actually just close it. So they'll say, well, I want to go on a break. I want to take a break. And then in the case of a girl doing that, usually it's, I want to take a break and I'm going to go see if I can hook up with this other guy. Um, and all right, I'll return to your question after I finish this one. Do I believe in, yeah? So with breaks, basically, like the girl will usually use that as an excuse to hook up with somebody, right? Or to pursue something else, or to simply move on herself without you moving on. If you say you want to go on a break, I mean, I don't usually hear about guys doing that. It's mostly girls who talk about going on breaks because girls don't want to be direct and girls don't want to say, hey, I don't want to. Girls don't want to, they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so they're gonna be indecisive with it and wait until they have something else that they can jump on. Now, yeah, and I can say in a relationship context, I don't really know any time that a break's worked. Um, Getting back to exes alone is something that is like not really effective, but you have a higher chance, no question, of getting back together with an ex after like actually officially breaking up and creating some distance between it than you do just like going on a break. Because what happens is that like it's one party is always more invested than the other, and there's an arbitrariness like, oh well, we're still together but we're just not like together. That's just like somebody's in denial. So I think really clarity on the nature of the relationship is really important, and breaks don't give that clarity. Now, I will talk about something that's similar to a break but a little bit different, which is a separation. And I think a separation is separation is like a break in that it almost always means that things are ending. Separations are more difficult though because it's the ending of a marriage, so there's shared assets, often children. The chance of reconciliation in a separation is much higher than a break. Break doesn't mean fuck. Doesn't mean anything at all. The separation, you know, I think that you have to read individual context with this. Sometimes a separation is just like we're separated because it takes time legally for things to process. And in that case, you could date a separated woman. Um, but it's if you ever want to get really serious, like particularly moving in with a girl, I would never do that if the woman was still married. But separation, because sometimes there's a reconciliation. Sometimes there's a reconciliation with these things, and I've known a couple people who have reconciled after separation, and they separate, and then one goes and fucks a bunch of people. Maybe he was cheated on, maybe she was cheated on. She goes on a little spree. They come back, they work things out. So separations can work. Um, but yeah, in general, clarity on these kind of things. All right, I'm going to try to answer some of these things real quick because I already started the question. I usually save these things for the end. Meaning parents bring the girls and you choose to pursue or not. Parents generally already filter for family and astrology. Would you choose from there? What criteria would you recommend? Because you only do 1 or 2 meetings or decide to quickly proceed or not. Okay, so I really want to be clear here. I don't come from a background that has done arranged marriages for a very long time. So I am just going to give my own perspective, although I'm not. I see benefits in arranged marriages, and I think that it does bypass a lot of the modern bullshit that you get can lead to clarity in the relationship. I also have seen that it can lead to functional marriages, or at least did lead to functional marriages, but without necessarily a lot of passion, um, or real like emotional engagement from both parties, and would lead to things that tempt one or both parties to cheat, or to at least repress how they feel. So, given all this stuff, parents bring the girls and you choose to pursue or not, how to quickly identify girls for arranged marriages, which ones you should go with. I mean, I think that the things that you want to really look for here are you physically attracted to her. I don't just mean physically attracted, like, oh yeah, she's pretty enough. I mean, like, do you feel something? All right, you have to feel something. Do you feel something when you see this girl? If you don't feel something when you see this girl, and you have to use your mind to convince yourself that you should do this, I would not do it. I would not do it, because that feeling when you see a girl and there's a resonance there, yeah, there's physical parts to that, but there's also things beyond physical there. There's something else that you are sensing, whether it's pheromonal or whether it's something deeper in that girl, and that is what you need to allow yourself to guide. So if everything else in the structure has been in this context of like the marriage being arranged or the possibility being arranged, that this girl, is a good values match, she comes from a good family, and astrology, right? Vedic astrology, um, and that she's good on that standpoint. Then, if you feel something for her, if you really feel it, then in that cultural context, I think that's about as good as you can do. But if you don't feel it, but you're like, well, she's attractive, but you just don't feel a spark, I really would not do it. The spark's important. Don't let people tell you the spark's not important, guys. Don't let them tell you it's not important. There's a lot of people who love the LARP. They love LARPing. They love talking about how, things have gone too far in romantic love. I agree with that. A lot of like, Disneyization of relationships, but that's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. That's when you're starting to get into the point where you feel like it's all fantasy, right? And you're not taking any ownership and you're projecting out a fantasy on the other person. I'm simply saying that you need to feel something when you see the person. Every successful marriage I have seen, really, they knew pretty early on. They knew pretty early on. They may have waited, but if you were to really ask them, they'd know pretty quickly because they felt it. Like my wife lived far away from me when I started dating her, but I remember after it was basically our second time. Okay, we had met, and then it was like our second date basically, and after that, it was like a long period of time we were together. We were on a trip, but after that, like I came back and I was like, I think could probably marry this girl. It was like so easy. And then the next time we hung out, like I told her I loved her. I mean, I was not like a inexperienced person with women, like, but I knew pretty quickly. So that's what I'd say. All right, I'm gonna get to the other questions on here at the end. All right, I'm gonna do that because I got people who submitted questions already, and I got to get to them. So this is funny order here. So piggybacking off of this last question about arranged marriages and why you don't want to ignore that spark, said, "Good evening, Pat from India. How can I get 2 to 4 reliable friends with benefits in India who can make me happy with sex and good guidance? I am an unhappily married person and starved of sex and love. Thanks." Okay, I feel bad for this person. I'm not here to bully side anything, okay? Because I think that frankly this person has had a lack of understanding and care for him in his life. I do not feel like when I've heard this person when he messaged me, what I've really felt from him was that, the intention wasn't even so much like I want to have these friends and benefits because I just want to, how do I put it? This person is just not being treated well in his marriage, and the cultural context that he's in doesn't is not giving him as many options to deal with it. And so it's coming out in a fantasy that, well, let me go for the side pieces. Let me try to pick up some other girls and hook up with them, and then I can, ignore the fact that I'm married to somebody who will not meet any of my needs and doesn't want to, doesn't care about me. Now, I don't know this person's situation. I'm not going to advise the question directly because it's just not. This it's not doesn't lead to any happiness. I'm not going to give advice for something that's not going to lead to a positive outcome, right? Picking up some friends with benefits. I mean, honestly, like you're starved of sex, and there's nothing you can do to leave the marriage. I never believe that, by the way. I never believe that. It's always an excuse in my experience. It's always an excuse. It could be difficult to leave it, but you always have a choice. You always have a choice. But if you're starved of sex, then there's prostitutes, right? You could do that on the side if you prefer to do that. Um, Trying to start off like friends with benefit stuff though, with random girls while you've got a wife. If you have a wife and you don't have kids, just like I know you're going to be ostracized from the community, but maybe you need to wake up the community to the fact that it's not going to work. But frankly, I would much more recommend you address the issues in the relationship. Try to deal with that. If that doesn't work, then and I have tons and tons of material on addressing things in the relationship, telling the truth. But if she's not going to provide you with sex or affection, then you either divorce her or at that point you just simply you separate from her. If you're not legally allowed to divorce, then you just leave her. Just leave her. I mean, if a woman is not willing to do the work with you and move forward and try to create a relationship that's meaningful, if she just has contempt for you and hates the situation, divorce there's no reason to stay with her. Nobody benefits from it. There's not a single person who benefits from this. So, like, just do it. Just do it. If you actually care about having a life that involves, love and meaning, love and sex, you're not going to get it with friends and benefits. You're just going to complicate your life more. You have to address the problem, which is that you married someone who doesn't care about you. And the first thing you need to do is lead as a man and try to change that marriage. And if that doesn't work, then you need to leave the marriage. And then you can go and date. But I mean, fairs are not gonna cut it. All right. Next question. Hey Pat, are there any circumstances where a couple could get back together after one had an affair and divorced the other? She did this, now regrets it. We have 2 young boys together. She says she wants me and the family back. She's a 9 to 10 on the scale, and all I'm seeing is overweight monsters here in the South. I can't relocate. I haven't found a replacement yet. I think I know the answer, red pill, but looking for insight. Man, this is a good question. This is a really good question. Okay. I actually think that the relationship could work. Things could go back. Right, no. Cross that out. Things can't go back. That you could have a relationship with this woman again. You guys could get remarried. Things could change. The problem here, this is the glaring problem, is that you have not gotten enough. How do I put it? You are not doing enough to. It sounds like, okay, you can't find anybody else. Everyone's overweight monsters in the area. You need to have more abundance before you could get back together with her. Because here's the thing: she cheated. I don't know the reason she cheated. It's not explained here. Um, if you just simply accept her back after she's had a bad experience and she probably misses, she misses what she had. Sure, she misses the comfort of it. She misses the security. But if she cheated, almost certainly an aspect of this was that you were not the kind of man perspective. Like, you're making her, you already said she's a 9 or 10, and objectively that could be true from a looks perspective, but I'm sensing in the question itself, I'm sensing this, like, I can't find anybody else, so I should get back with her. And that's the problem. You can't do that. You can't do that because that mindset was almost certainly, I mean, I can say certainly, was underneath at least what caused her to cheat. She just felt like she had too much power vis-a-vis you. So that has to be dealt with before you can do anything, because she needs to understand her position in the relationship. I don't mean this like that woman needs to understand her position, but I mean, right now, I just don't. It seems like there's just not enough abundance here, that she would not be let back in on the right terms. I don't think that it's necessarily a bad decision to let her back into your life, to get back together with her. I don't know. I don't know enough about the situation. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know what this regret of hers looks like. Could look pretty bad, could look pretty, you know, minor. But yeah, I would not get back into a relationship if there's any sense of desperation or lack of abundance. I wouldn't do it. With someone who cheat on you, just, I would not do it. You're asking for trouble. And if she does something like that again, it'll be bad. It'll be bad for sure. Okay, next question. I still notice a Hey Pat. I still notice a fascination by some parts of the manosphere with polyamory. I've read what you've written previously on the subject in your blog, and I largely agree with your conclusions, although there is an element I have not seen you address. Certain manosphere advocates of polyamory suggest it's a better system because of diminishing female sex drive, usually after the first 3 to 4 years of marriage. I think this speaks to a fear many men have, that the woman they have chosen will eventually no longer find them sexually interesting, and that this is not to be a factor that they can control despite being in good shape and having an interesting persona, etc. I would love to hear your thoughts on this in relation to polyamory. Another great question. Really, really great question. Um, Anything that's based on fear is the enemy. Now, there is reality, the sense that you have any two people who first get together in a relationship are more likely to have sex with each other, right? Sex drive is going to be higher. There's going to be more of that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Um, there's no reason that, like, whenever I see this stuff happen in relationships over time, it happens because the guy does not understand the emotional levels of a woman. I've said this many times. I wear lots of hats. Okay. I work with guys on dating. I work with guys on relationships, work with guys increasingly on spiritual components. And of course, the various gradations in between dating, relationships, psychology, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The reason I wear these hats is because things change on different levels and things change at different stages. So what works to get a girl in the beginning of a relationship becomes insufficient at later stages. And so guys, I think, who get into polyamory with this mindset, what they're really talking about is they want to spin plates. They're trying to outsource a girl's sex drive to sexual competition that she's going to have to work to perform to chase after him. And I'm not denying that this is a impulse. I'm not denying that this is an impulse that women have. Men have it too, frankly. If you make people feel like they're going to lose something, they will act more in order to get it. But that's not intimacy, right? Um, if you're a high value guy and she knows you're a high value guy, she can see other women are interested in you by that. That's implicit dread right there. Getting her sex drive on a regular level to be high becomes more and more in a relationship about being able to understand her emotionally, being able to understand where she's at. Okay. Like, I know this is, some guys are going to call this stuff like blue pill or whatever, because they just, I mean, they don't get it. Like, major red pill leaders have their marriages falling apart, or they don't get married because they can't handle this stuff. They got divorced. They failed, basically. I'm not trying to say this to be like a dick or anything. I mean, I think that making mistakes and having a marriage fall apart, there's nothing to be ashamed about that. It's all learning experiences. I'm just making the point that these people are in a fear paradigm. Something bad happened, and then they assume you can't fix it. The reason I'm different about this is because when I saw the problems that they saw, I actually looked at people who were successful. So rather than look at the failures, only at the failures, I looked at the successes. And all of my work has been trying to integrate the variations between the successes and the cautionary tales. Sometimes people who are the successes don't take seriously enough the negatives. Sometimes people in the negative who emphasize the negatives don't take seriously enough the positives. But there's multiple ways a relationship can go. And I mean, yeah, sex is not necessarily going to be as crazy as it was when you first were falling in love with each other, but it gets deeper, it gets more intimate, gets more intense. In many ways, it gets more intense, and there's no reason that it would have to decline. The only other point I want to make here is that, and a guy who generally I think his material is not that good, and I think he's a bit of a. I've heard some guys in the manosphere really go off about him. Some people like him though. He's not really around anymore. Black Dragon. He's kind of big. 15, 20, 15, 16, 17, maybe even 18. Throat's getting dry, by the way. I guess I have COVID. Um, he basically talked a lot about the fact that some women just have different sex drives than others, and that's just such a true statement. Um, and it's kind of funny that he was kind of this like no commitment model himself, but it is actually kind of funny that he was one of the only people who even mentioned it, which is that, yeah, some women have a higher sex drive than other women, and some men do as well. And that a lot of a good relationship is matching sex drives. It's actually like completely accurate statement. But of course, there's a baseline sex drive, and then there's a range in which it can go. All right, I'm going to check some comments here real quick. All right. What's going on here? Biden lack of attractive women. Is the Biden campaign over now? All right. So next question. So this was a comment about my tweet. I responded to Thomas777, which anybody who follows BAP's podcast knows about him. By the way, of course, I don't endorse anything. I just thought it was a good tweet because, as the guys of those of you who have followed me for whatever, at least the last year, know I've talked about this stuff before. I've been talking a lot, especially over the summer, about the death seeking nature of men, and so when he talked about this himself, about how men have a death wish, it was an opportunity for me to talk about how, yeah, and a form of death for men is women. So what do I mean by this? I'm not going to go too much into it, because I've gone into it a lot of other occasions, and I go into this a bit in much more detail in my masterclass, and I'd also talk about it in my 22 convention speech. But men are really life seeking out death, and women are death seeking out life, and that's the yin yang sort of dynamic of masculine and feminine. Um, Women, for a man, is like a release from the burdens of life. Men escape into women. If they're doing it unconsciously, they will escape into women. Consciously, they have more of a healthy, balanced dynamic and energy exchange. But women, like a lot of guys, will give up big projects. They will give up their life goals because a woman enters their life. And then what happens is that their life gets drained and the woman's done with them. They die in a certain sense. And the woman goes and seeks a new life elsewhere. Whereas the man will seek new death elsewhere, because this woman is no longer providing that escape for him. And that's when guys fall into things like porn, or, these are just little approximations for a man of deaths. And which is, and a common comment people made underneath that, which I made in a speech, was about, in French, an orgasm is le petit mort. Nietzsche talked about orgasms as a form of death, right? So this is all, you get into esoterics with it. So as a man, you need to be careful about women, because women can drain your life force, right? A succubi is an archetype of a woman. The succubi will suck the life out of you. And men enjoy that on a certain level. If they don't have an awareness of their energy, that's a way for them. They will indulge in that stuff, and they'll lose themselves in it. Cool. Next question. Guys, Mencia. I'm telling you guys, you gotta try this. You gotta try Mencia. This is such an interesting wine. Okay. Got 2 more questions here. I guess maybe there's one in the chat. Hey Pat, is there such a thing as too much sex in a relationship, and is it ever a good idea to take a break, slow down it? If so, is it any better or worse if the male female initiates it? Another good question. Yeah, mine dementia. um, so, is it ever a good idea to take a break, slow down on it? I would say, guys, okay, I'm not going to arbitrate the amount of sex that you have in your relationship. And I think that this is the better question here is, the better answer here for this question is, stop having people online or wherever tell you how much sex you should or shouldn't be having. This goes back to one of the prior questions. Sometimes um, there is a sex drive difference. Hey Ben, that's awesome. I love to hear that, man. I love to hear it. Always going out and approaching. That's what I like. That's what I like to hear. I like to hear approaching cute girls. So you're gonna have your own sex drive. You're gonna have your own preferences, how much sex you want to have, when you want to have it, and your girl's gonna have that too. So do what you want to do, right? So much of this stuff is like, figure out what you want and learn from people to how to figure out what you can get, if you can get what you want, right? But the problem is that you'll go on Twitter and you'll see somebody who just had sex. There's that famous Lonely Island music video, I Just Had Sex, right, with T-Pain, or maybe it's Akon, actually. It's Akon. And they're talking about how they just had sex and how great it is. That's like the manosphere Twitter sometimes. They're like, I just had sex. Yeah, I'm such a man. Yeah, girl just had sex with me. Yep. Second time we've had it today, actually. Yep, having a lot of sex. Okay, look, cool, cool. I'm happy for you guys. I'm happy for you guys. You guys are having sex. Sex is great. Sex is great. I'm a big fan of sex. Um, you know, sometimes the energy between a couple at a certain point is not this sort of like ferocious, I want to have sex all the time. And it doesn't mean that the relationship isn't good. I do think there's a certain point, there's certain, if two people aren't having sex a lot, but they feel like their relationship's good, are they just in like a contented state? That's another good point about shame, right? Sometimes people have a very high sex drive, but then they have shame around it. And then so they don't want to do it. And that's a real, like, in a certain sense, a shit test for a guy if it's not handled correctly, because that can lead to then they suddenly don't want to have sex anymore, and they create all sorts of kind of, it's very interesting how that stuff can unfold. But yeah, just, I mean, I think that the man should usually initiate sex, but it's also great if the woman initiates it. I mean, each relationship's going to be distinct with this, and I think you actually get into more trouble when you look outside and you try to have it. Like, the real question here is, are you satisfied with the amount of sex you're having on a physiological and emotional level? And if it's not on an emotional level, how much of that has to do with the fact that you feel like you're less of a man because you only had it every other day instead of every day? I mean, I do think that there's certain points that, like, if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s and you're not having sex, like, at least every other week, I would really say every week. I mean, I do think that that begs some kind of question about, um, things that are being left on the table at the very least, because physiologically, you should, as a man, like, wanna come every 5 days, like, minimum, you should wanna come every 5 days, because that's about when you get, like, a full load. So, not to say that you can't bypass that and move on past it, but it would seem to me that the issue there is that there's a lack of, you start to move away from physiological need after 5 days, and it starts to become much more about, like, the energy in the relationship, which may not be, like, bad, but it may not be that there just may be, like, intimacy being left on the table. The connection's probably not as deep as it could be. There's not enough effort being put into that. That would be what I would say. That'd be what I would say. But again, I don't want anyone to feel ashamed about this kind of stuff. I think it's, you know, I've been in relationships, and I've been at stages of life where I'd have sex as many as 5 times a day, and, um, that was fine. I wouldn't want that now. I don't have that, and I wouldn't want it. Um, I'm also 32 and not 22. It's different of my age and drive, but, like, I don't it's just not, to me. I think you really gotta really gotta, like, figure out what works for your relationship. Alright, the, aphrodisiacs help a bit, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really found any that I found particularly impressive in that regard. I've done all sorts of, I've tried out different little aphrodisiac oils and stuff like that, and I've eaten oysters. I've eaten a lot of oysters, and I don't really notice much of a difference, to be honest, guys. The main difference here comes down to, how clean you're eating, and actually how much, like, other things are distracting you in your life. Like, I find that if you're focused on, like, other forms of entertainment, then your sex drive decreases. So I think your energy gets directed towards, like, the technology versus towards the other person. No one really talks about that, but that's probably a major reason why people don't have as much sex today as they used to. Yeah, and soy is I would not say soy is very good, but I'm not gonna get into that stuff. All right, last question here. Well, actually, let me see. There's another question here. I think someone said another question. Um, my wife left me and took my kids. Any advice, bro? Um, man, I feel for you. I feel for you, but you got to give some more information about that. I mean, the advice is that stay close to some close guy friends. Um, there's a lot of people on here who are here for you. If you want to, send me a DM and tell me about your situation, I'd be happy to help more. Um, the only thing I would just say is that this is this is a transitional moment for you. It's not the end of your life. All right. So if you're having any thoughts like my life is over, like cut that out of your mind. It's the end of an old life and it's the beginning of a new life. And the new life can and very, very often is better than the old. Because in the old life, if this thing happened and it sounds like it blindsided you, that's a really big indication that there's a lack of awareness. So if you build up that awareness, you're not going to have the situation happen again. Your life is going to transform so much more for the better. It's a gift. I know that you're going to, like, people are going to hear that. They're like, fuck you, dude. Fuck you. This is a terrible situation. It's not a gift. It's a terrible situation to experience, terrible to experience, but the outcome of it is a gift. The outcome is a gift, can be a gift, because it is about you expanding your consciousness and awareness, which allows you to create a better life and to become a better father and to be a better man who will get a better woman. Okay? So if you do, yeah, it's a gift wrapped in barbed wire. The reality is that you will either experience it in a terrible, terrible way and you can become bitter about it and you can let it destroy the rest of your life, or you can accept the lessons from it that it's giving you and you can make your life better. That's it. There's two choices. There's two choices. So, I mean, it's kind of, in a certain sense, pointless to say, hey, this is a great thing. It happened. It's not even about that. It's just that it's given you an opportunity. You have a fork in the road about where you're going to go. You can go and you can think it's all over, or you can go and think, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to become better than this. And then you actually will join a very, very respected club with a lot of great men, awake men for the most part. So it's your choice, brother. All right, last question. Pat, I'm a young guy with a lot of sexual energy, and whenever I move more into a monk mode, no fap state, this energy typically grows stronger and can limit my focus. The ability to transmute it has proved elusive. I've built myself up enough as a man that opportunities for hookups are relatively consistent. In other words, the temptation can become reality if I want it to. I don't want to repress my desires, and part of me could benefit from more sexual experience, but I'm ultimately concerned about the energetic cost of casual flings. I also wonder if, given that one day I want a wife with a relatively low number of former partners, am I making that goal more difficult to achieve down the road by increasing my own notch count, thus making a partner with low experience less of a vibrational match? I wanted to get your perspective and any advice on this, given your experience and what you know about the esoteric side of sex and relationships. All right. Some really, really good questions, and it's been a very sex-focused Periscope, which is great. Okay. So, here's the deal. Okay? Here's the deal. High energy men will have to find an outlet for that energy. Even if they can really, I mean, even trying to control it as much. This is a very like realistic question. This is a guy who's aware, he's trying to transmute it. Um, I think my main question is, why is he moving into monk mode, no fap? Because I think it's kind of a bit of a meme. I do think that there's periods where it makes sense to go into this sort of state, but I mean, why isn't he looking for a girl, right? If this is something that he wants to move with, why isn't he looking for a girl? Maybe he has a big project that he's working on. That's why he wants to do it. He wants to focus. But then it sounds like also part of his focus isn't on the project. Now, if it's just simply that he's got a lot of energy and there's a sense that he's gonna, he's gonna like he needs to jerk off, he wants to jerk off, whatever. I mean, I actually don't really see much of a big issue with every, once a week or so, if you're not with a girl, if you, without porn, go and jerk off. Like, just to the sensation. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it, frankly, if heaven forbid I don't go for a week, then my body will do that on its own in my sleep. Like, it's not something that, physiologically speaking, I mean, it's. I think people get carried away with this stuff. I think they get carried away with it, and there's a point where sexual energy can become a distraction for a guy. In terms of a girl to do this stuff with, a great option, if you want to go with a girl, like aside from everything I just said, because I think that maybe you should be open to meeting a girl, or maybe the project that this person's working on isn't quite the right project because it's not taking enough of his attention, and or maybe he's taking it too seriously that he can't just jerk off once a week and get it over with and move on to focus. I mean, I have to be really honest here, guys. There's been some times in the past where I've had a lot of work and I've been stressed, and trying to not jerk off was wasting more of my energy than just doing it once and getting it over with. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. Um, so with this thing though, if I think that he would do well to have a girl. Maybe it's just tier two, but some girl who he felt a connection with, even if she's not like long term material, but just some girl that he could enjoy spending time with, and could it understood his situation, and that they could be intimate with each other. And maybe this only goes on for a couple months. This is something that I found can work really well in the past. I've done it in the past. I have I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a lot cleaner on lot of different levels than just going around and trying to pick up random girls. It saves a lot more energy than doing that, and it can be really like intimate and rewarding at the same time. Um, I mean, there's a couple. So I guess the point here is there's a couple different options to deal with the problem, and you have to figure out which one resonates most with you as an individual in your own value system. I do think that there's something to be said about going around just hooking up with as many girls as you can to get rid of the energy. It's a distraction. It's not really necessarily the right progression. And I do think that that can, um, if you that can damage things, especially if you're looking for like a really trad girl. She sees that you've entered into that sort of frequency. But I mean, at the end of the day, the girl you're going to be with has to accept what kind of person you want to be. And out of these various choices I've presented, which one of those ones resonates with you? Obviously, what you're doing isn't really working. It's not an alignment. You're taking a program, and maybe it's like it presents itself as a good program. It's very trad, no fat monk mode, not going to be with any other girls. But it's not an alignment. It's not in alignment for you, because obviously you're really struggling with it and you're asking the question. So you got to figure out a different way of operating that's going to be more in alignment. That's the secret, guys. That's the secret to all these things. Okay? Take what resonates and you leave the rest. So I'll see you guys tomorrow for the COVID Cabal. Thanks.